You are listening to the FORSCOM Frontline, bringing you to our soldiers on the front lines of readiness.
Hey everyone, and welcome to FORSCOM Frontline. I'm Jeannie, and I'm your host. And today I am joined by Command Sergeant Major TJ Holland, who is the Command Sergeant Major of the U.S. Army Forces Command. So welcome, Sergeant Major. It's a pleasure to have you on today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me back for
Absolutely.
Another season
Yeah,
on the podcast.
And you've been on, several times before, so you know the drill and how this goes. But this one's going to be a little different. This year in 2025, we are going to be focusing all on warfighting and lethality throughout the forces. So this year we're obviously going to talk to you first, start at the top, and then we're going to head down to the corps and some of the divisions and find out what they've been doing to support the warfighting mission. So you've talked over the last year in various forums about warfighting and what that means to FORSCOM and lethality and things like that. To begin, let's just kind of talk about that important role in the Army and in FORSCOM.
Absolutely, and again, thanks for the opportunity. Last time we did this last year, when we kicked off last season's podcast series, my children critiqued me pretty hard, so I'm hoping to deliver this time around, because, the number one fans are out there, they're scrutinizing me. And the other part, too, is you never really truly understand how many people actually get a chance to kind of tune in and really kind of respond to this. And I saw the dialogue that was going out there and an emphasis on what we do, what our number one thing in the Army is. When you think about number one, it's the chief, it's the secretary's number one priority. That's warfighting. And General Pappas and I like to kind of, chide about that comment. Really is, it's good karma. We're the good karma command, because that's all FORSCOM does. We train for warfighting. So being perfectly aligned as a headquarters with the Army's number one priority, why we exist, to fight and win our nation's wars, hey, that's fantastic. That are out there in Forces Command and our civilians to kind of make everything churn from day to day, the process. It's, we're ready to deploy, fight, and win whenever our nation calls. Now with that, you think about what the Army, kind of the structure of it is we're a combined arms maneuver type formation. We're an offensive-oriented Army. So you think about everything it is, from the tip of the spear, the warfighter on the edge, all the way back to sustaining a force. All those capabilities reside in Forces Command, whether you're an active component, the National Guard, or the United States Army Reserve. And in the mindset for the leaders and the soldiers, the DA civilians and family members that participate on who that soldier is that's out there on the edge kind of leading that effort, that's a warfighting mindset. That's a combined arms maneuver mindset, right? So we think about those types of leaders that we want, the culture we want. Leaders that act with boldness, right? They take charge in the absence of orders. They execute the mission and intent. Think back to the paratroopers and the soldiers that stormed the beaches and landed in the fields of Normandy Peninsula back on World War II, that were just creating havoc in the behind the German lines. We want soldiers that are empowered and understand that and take that disciplined initiative, win at the point of contact. Whether you're that fire team leader in a rifle squad, you're a member of a crew on an Abrams tank or a Bradley or a Stryker, you're a member of a staff. You own a piece of that fight, and every day you're going to get the opportunity to take initiative and win at the point of contact.
That is fantastic. And I'm proud to work for FORSCOM, because I think our mission is just a fantastic one, and we make up the majority of the United States Army. So
Absolutely.
we are their fighting force, and that's why having this mission and this message is important. Now, another word that I've heard you say a lot is lethality.
Absolutely.
And I have read all of your articles, and in case you guys haven't read them, we'll drop a couple of them in the show notes for you. Decoding Lethality and your Muddy Boots article. They're fantastic reads if you haven't read them yet. So can you define lethality for our audience and how it applies to FORSCOM and why it's important?
No, absolutely. And, if you had a chance to read, or you heard me talk at AUSA, or even last year, we kind of started scratching the surface of what lethality is. You're like, oh boy, here comes another cool buzzword. Mm-hmm. It's actually inculcated in our doctrine. The term itself is in our field manuals with how we fight. And we took a hard look at what it really truly meant to be lethal. Because we say we're ready, you're the immediate response force in the 82nd, or you're an IRF Armor Brigade, or a contingency response force 101st, or out there across the Army. You have an enhanced readiness responsibility. And there's a level of readiness and training for purpose that goes with that. But we talk lethal. What does that truly mean? And the summation of it is the capability and capacity to destroy your adversary. So why does it truly matter for soldiers in FORSCOM? It's, can you do your job, the one you signed up for? We talked about warfighting in the beginning, but it's fight, win, survive, and thrive in combat, in conflict. So how do we do it? Well, we got to find out how to measure what matters to us. And we keep saying lethality, so it does matter to us. We want to be lethal. We want to dominate our adversary, break their will to fight and compete. We don't even want them to show up because we're that imposing, because the adversary that they look at across whatever conflict that they potentially could sign up for, we're winning when we show up, because that inherent fear they have for our lethality. So it starts at the combat training centers. We took a hard look. You got this dynamic training plan, home station training. You'd go do gunnery. You go qualifying your individual weapon systems. You start counting how many experts you have, how many sharpshooters, how many crews qualified, Q1, distinguished. And, you start looking at your stats. You do your retraining, and you kind of build that up. You're like, all right, we're good. And you go to the CTC, and we take you away from that static range, from that fixed target that's standing there for 10 to 15 seconds, and we replicate the rigors of conflict. Not just like any old conflict, but from an adversary that decidedly wants to destroy you and break our will to fight. And we take a look at that downrange feedback, really the battle damage assessment. So there's 6 factors in how we kind of look at engaging a target, where there's exposure times, engagement times, declination of fire, angle of fire, caliber of weapon system, all those different things. And what we found out is, it was really hard to account for that BDA, but once we got it down, we started looking at like, hey, that downrange feedback is telling us a story, and we can start seeing who our most lethal crews and squads are out there. We started off not very hot when we first started. It's about 15 months ago, because we were truly focused on our qualification scores, because that's what we report in our readiness metrics. Measuring lethality has brought a renewed emphasis on actually dominating in a live fire, and we're up to about hitting 75 to 80% of our targets now in a live fire, under very challenging, rigorous terms like I described, right?
Right.
That's still a C. But what does a C bought us? Well, the last NTC rotation, we had a crew on an Abrams tank kill 18 OP4 tanks. That's
wow.
18. 1 to 18. And they're still surviving and thriving, right? That's what we want. We changed the Bradley and Abrams gunnery tables. We're piloting them in FORSCOM right now. They're harder. Well, guess what? So's conflict.
Right.
Right? So that return on investment I talked about, we're at a C. What did that C truly buy us? Well, the USER International Tank Competition. First time a U.S. tank crew won.
Yes.
Ever.
I was going to ask you about that, because I just read the article.
Red 1-4.
And it's amazing
Yeah.
that, we have never, won something of that caliber before.
That's right.
And what made this team so special that you think that they, won
Absolutely.
the overall competition?
So, it was Alpha Red 4, Alpha 1-4, 167 Armor, Iron Soldiers out of the 1st Armor Division, right? Mm-hmm. What made them special? Well, you hear SMA and talk about brilliance of the basics. You hear me talk about mastering the fundamentals. They're kind of synonymous with each other. There were about 10 things they were evaluated on, fundamental task proficiency, collective task proficiency, what truly set our U.S. crews, because there was another crew from 3rd ID who actually did very well too.
Okay.
That placed in the top 4.
Oh, wow.
Just missed getting on the podium.
So we're just doing awesome all around.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I talked about being a C at the live fire at CTCs. Well, that C translated, we separated ourselves from the other NATO ally tank crews on the live fire range. Not the static qualification range. They did a live fire scenario, and that's where we separated ourselves from our international peers. And that was the true success. So that C bought us a win. What happens when we start shooting Bs and As and qualifying Q1 distinguished on live fires or experts on live fires? Well, we're hoping to see we got another Indo-Pacific International Tank Competition. It's going to be in Australia. We're going to send some crews over there to compete.
Can I come?
I want to go.
I would love to go to Australia.
I can't justify that one for myself,
Darn
but I'm
it.
sure they need
Yeah,
some
no.
PO coverage. I'm just saying. But then we got the Sullivan Cup coming around again, and we want to win that. The active component wants to win that. National Guard is still on our team. They won last time around, but now the active, we want to take it. And I think we're starting to kind of build that up. So that's kind of like where we saw that lethality, really that return on investment
That's
translate.
exciting.
Right, tip of the spear.
Absolutely. And in reading your article, Decoding Lethality, you talk about us being at kind of a 70 percentile now. And in the beginning, we were at a mean of like 50. So
52%.
It was pretty low. So in the 15 months that we've been doing that, we basically went from, what would you say, a D- up to a C? Or because I thought 70 was pretty good. I was like, oh, C? Okay.
52% would have taken all the electronics out of my children's hands from school. That's
Exactly.
That's an F. As
Okay.
if we were going to grade ourselves, but that's being really hard because those crews and squads, those brigades that are going to CTC live fires, rightfully so, they've got a lot of distinguished firers. They got a lot of Q1s on crews. Mm-hmm. They got a lot of field artillerymen shooting table 18 and doing fantastic. We got a lot of squads that are shooting expert. We just do them a curveball, and we wanted to have a true assessment. Said if there was an Article 5 violation in NATO right now, and the United States was called to conflict, would we actually dominate? I think we would do quite well, but I think we're going to do a lot better this year than we did last year.
Absolutely. And it's kind of like pushing them beyond muscle memory.
That's right.
Because you can go to a range and you can shoot down, 15 days in a row, the same thing over and over. But when you take them to a live fire exercise, it's unpredictable.
Right.
And so you're putting them in an unpredictable environment and saying win, and they've succeeded. So
absolutely. So
that I consider that a huge measure of success in what we've been trying to do with lethality within FORSCOM.
And absolutely. And the good news is we own the two crown jewels of the Army, the National Training Center and Joint Readiness Training Center. And the CTCs have driven change for our Army. Home station training is really good, but CTCs is where we can put that, the unknown, Black Horse, Geronimo, a free thinking Op4, because we also look at the simulations. We measure the simulation data as well, not just a live fire. So that you're like, Sergeant Major, Miles rules the battlefield, ha ha ha. Well, you'd be surprised because the whatever you do in the simulation, if you're only hitting 52% of Black Horse, well, guess what? We've seen that transfer over within minor error about 52% of the targets that you'll engage and kill on the live fire. And we've gotten better. Feedback, too, is we've also made our live fires better. We made them realistic. We moving all the administrative movements, so we're actually doing a combined arms breach. You're doing all the things you would do in conflict. There's no administrative movement through the breach. You're maneuvering and engaging targets through the breach. We don't give you just infinity targets. The targets are going to maneuver on you, and they're going to be in a timer. They don't just get up there until you see them, and we up and down drill to make you like, hey, I'm over here, shoot me. We make it hard.
Absolutely, as we should, right? Really test them. And that kind of, I said, something like beyond muscle memory. However, that's kind of your idea of, I've heard you say and I've read, brilliant at the basics or mastering the fundamentals. So we have to be good at that before we can be good at lethality. Is that what I'm kind of gathering?
Yeah, and if you've heard me kind of engage before, in a forum, you probably heard me say, like, hey, it's become increasingly apparent that our small unit leaders had to be brilliant at the basics. If you look at lessons observed both from Ukraine and the Gaza Strip recently, you could give everybody all the newest technology. We can have UAVs saturating the skies. We can have autonomous vehicles driving around on the earth. It still takes a soldier to operate those things. The soldier, it's still the human dimension of what we bring to bear. But fundamentally, soldiers still have to maneuver. They still have to identify, find, engage targets. They still have to do the little things correctly. When you think about survivability on the battlefield, it's just omnipresence of of collection, whether it's satellite, whether it's UAS, whether it's just cameras in a city, or just people with cell phones that have cameras that are taking pictures or shooting video and sharing it on social media or out there, whatever, the open source. It's almost hard to hide in today's battlefield, especially in a country like Ukraine where there are people living in amongst your soldiers operating with the populace. So we have to, as soldiers, have to be really brilliant at the fundamental things to be survivable, right? Simple things we're learning is like fieldcraft, hiding in plain sight. You're dispersing your EMF, signature. We're operating in a DDIL environment where not just it's going to be hard to communicate, but it's going to be hard to sense, and someone's always looking for you. So those little fundamental things, identify. I talked about being great in live fire.
Mm-hmm.
We still struggle at the night iteration for target identification, acquisition, and engagement. Meaning, I can look at cards and identify, oh yeah, that's a T90 mic, but I also have to look at my night sight and say, oh yeah, that's a T90 mic. That's not another M1. That's a friendly. And then our allies have similar kind of tanks and then some of our adversaries. So it's really important for us to be able to do the things at day and night. That brilliance at the basics, really, it translates to the discipline. If you ever think, you're out there at home station training, you're down, you're a dog-faced soldier in 3rd ID at Fort Stewart, and you're like going through the reps and sets and motions, and you're like, we'll wait until we get out in the field, and we'll tighten up the standards on this task. Or next thing you know, that we had a brigade in 3rd ID get called forward to Europe, and within 7 days we're shooting gunnery.
Right.
You think about like, wow, we didn't expect that to happen because that brigade was 6 months removed from being the KRF rotation in on the Pen in South Korea, just kind of deterring North Korean aggression. And then 7 days later, upon returning home, now they're in the European continent deterring Russian aggression. What if that was conflict? If you think that we're going to get better when we go to conflict, the discipline starts at home. So I think that's the most important thing. How do we do it? Well, we've been measuring. We got the Decisive Action Big 12 at the CTCs, and we look at these fundamental things, technical and tactical competencies for our NCOs and soldiers who are out there performing on the edge. Through those assessments, it's been probably about a decade of collecting the data. It all started with Sergeant Major of the Army Grinston with the FORSCOM Sergeant Major, and we've carried it forward. We're reassessing, are we getting it right? Because we don't want the Big 12 to be commandments etched in stone. We're not walking them off the mountain with the stone tablets and forcing this on the Army.
Right.
All right, so we're always reassessing our own way of assessing other formations. We are getting better. I'm proud of the soldiers across Forces Command because we have gotten so much better just by a renewed command emphasis and leader emphasis on being brilliant.
Absolutely. I think it's fantastic the way that we have approached warfighting in the last few years, especially with technology and, we're battling recruiting issues and things like that. So I think all of this is absolutely important. And one of the things I was out at JBLM for a lot of my husband's career. Like we were there for almost 10 years. And next month, I'll be talking to Lieutenant General McFarland, who is the 1st Corps Commanding General now. And you were just out in that theater last month. And I will say from a JBLM standpoint, we don't get a lot of recognition for what we do in the Indo-Pacific. I'm just going to say they are a huge power projection platform out there and can respond within 18 hours to anywhere in the Pacific. And I don't think a lot of people realize that or recognize that. And this, from my understanding, was your first time out in the Pacific region. And what did you learn? What did you see? And why is lethality, warfighting, the FORSCOM's mission important also in that region?
Well, I would tell you it's first time as FORSCOM Sergeant Major because I was a Brigade Sergeant Major in 25th Infantry Division, which is in 1st Corps. But you're right, JBLM, all the FORSCOM units, all the USERPAC aligned units that are out there in the Pacific Theater, they have an important mission. And if you look at our national defense strategy, when we look at who's out there as a pacing threat and our competitor, China is actually, they dominate the Indo-Pacific mindset, and it was really for me as a FORSCOM Sergeant Major, have an opportunity to go out and to the KRF, visit Ghost Brigade out there on the Penn, go up to Alaska, see the 11th JPMRC rotation, where our OCs from JRTC were supporting that rotation. USERPAC's planning conference, because our units, whether it's active or National Guard or Reserve, they sign up for the Joint Exercise Program and they project out in the theater, and we talk about readiness for purpose, and that's why I look at, JBLM First Corps units, FORSCOM units that project readiness, readiness for purpose and Indo-Pacific. What I saw out there with Ghost Brigade is just undistracted training. I mean, it was a great opportunity for them. What 2ID 8th Army is doing out there on the Penn and our rotational brigades, those striker brigades, just on Rodriguez range. I mean, had a chance to go out there to see Table 12 gunnery. I got to see platoon live fires. Like every day, they were just getting after it. No distractions. When I went up to Alaska, JPMRC, I talked about the 2 CTCs that are in Forces Command. That JPMRC is that exportable CTC for USERPAC. They do it in Alaska. They do it in Hawaii. As a former brigade sergeant major in Hawaii, I know how challenging the cuckoos are. I know how challenging the Pukla training area is. That terrain that's out there on the islands of Hawaii, it's similar to what you're going to see in a lot of the island campaigning missions that you have in the rest of the theater. That Arctic area that's up in Alaska, I was up there, although it was January, some reason, I guess I brought a nice little warm band of weather. It was a balmy 32 degrees when I hit the ground up there. But it did, but it got down below minus with over 80-mile-per-hour winds at the last couple of days. So there's something to be said about training in the environment you expect to fight in, right? With the 25th and the 11th, there's something to be said about dealing with those hardships because, as a young paratrooper, every time you're like, hey, we're going to be able to go anywhere in the world, and you get a country threat brief and you talk about the threats there, and then you start talking about this bug, this snake, this flower, this plant, everything wants to kill you. It's like, where am I supposed to sit down on the earth? And everything in Alaska, like the terrain, the weather, like if you're not prepared to fight and thrive in that environment, it'll absolutely take advantage of a weakness, and it's brutal. It is absolutely brutal, and it destroy morale and everything else. What I saw from the units training up there, the morale was high. We brought OCs from JRTC, which is what I was interested in, seeing how they participated and how they helped grow that exportable CTC and make it world class, kind of like what our CTCs are. Our CTC's program's been around for over 40 years. That's over 40 years of experience we brought to bear up there. And I saw a really great training environment. So I can't say enough about what First Corps is doing out there, and it's been fantastic. Their operational tempo is just as high as 18th Airborne Corps', and every day the leaders and soldiers of First Corps are just making it happen.
Absolutely. I have the utmost respect for that Corps, just because I spend so much time there. Don't worry. We spend a lot of time here at Fort Bragg as well. So back to Bragg, hashtag. Yep. I have like a lot of respect for them and what they do up there in that environment. And the strikers are so cool to me. So, in taking a look at that, and then in comparison to, the other corps and our units, what they're doing, the battlefield, it's evolving. And we talk a lot about transformation. And as we move ahead, with warfighting and continuously focusing on lethality, and as we transform our troops and getting that, those A's and B's, what are your words of wisdom to, leadership, to the troops, to the families, to everyone within FORSCOM? What do you want to say to them?
Yeah, General Pops and I got to engage the pre-command course yesterday, and everybody loves the word transformation. Transformation and contact. A lot of times you find when you're near a TIC unit, like TIC comes with resources. It comes with new kit, but also comes with the CDIS, the ACMs, the scientists. All these new experimental technology.
All these fancy words.
Yeah, right. All this cool stuff. Right, it's not Christmas. You didn't wake up, it's like, ooh, look at all this new stuff I got for my formation. And there's going to be an experimentation event. There's going to be an assessment event. The farther you get away from a TIC unit, the farther really it's kind of the least people actually understand the level of attention to detail that we put into those events. What our soldiers and leaders, our non-commissioned officers are doing to lead transformation. because we got to get it right. So we got to put
Right.
put all those acronyms I just labeled in the dirt with a non-commissioned officer, with a leader, to make sure we're actually getting it right, because that's going to impact our future structure. So, you think about, why are we doing it? Well, we're paying attention to what's going on in the world. We look at what's going on in Ukraine. We look at what happened in Gaza. And there's new forms of mass. There's new threats out there. So I talk about that brilliance at the basics. Well, that's warfighting at echelon. Whether it's a division staff, because now the division's a principal warfighting formation. We're putting divisions in the dirt at the CTCs. We just have to keep hitting those reps and sets and be ready for the next fight. Right? So that transformation is super important. Everybody should be excited about it. Everybody should be waiting at the door for the new ISV to show up in the motor pool, so you can get rid of all the old stuff and then come in with the new. I did talk about what it was meant to be lethal and how we kind of measure it. We're pushing ourselves to be better, and I think we're seeing a fantastic return on investment. The leaders are bought in. The soldiers join the Army to train, right? And they want to be better than their adversary. They want that trust and confidence in leadership and their equipment, and their training is paying off. That foundational training, that brilliance at the basics, like the international training, the tank competition, we won.
Absolutely.
We won because we showed up, we put in the work, we're better. In a lot of what we talk about at Forces Command is, our future's uncertain. There's one thing that is very clear to all of us in the room at Forces Command headquarters. It's our mindset, and we have to be adaptive in nature. We have to train with a purpose and intensity that we probably haven't brought into our formations in the last few years. We have to be out there drilling the smallest of things. When you look at the lessons observed and you see the little things that get people killed, that degrade combat power on that conflict, it's simple mistakes at the soldier level that you might overlook at home station training, or it might be on an after-action review at a CTC, but that could be the difference between life and death in conflict. We have to keep training, not training until we just get it right, but we got to keep training until we can't get it wrong. That's the most important thing. When I think about, kind of a few things to kind of impart on what I've seen as far as traveling around Forces Command and seeing all this transformation and all the goodness that's going on in our Army.
Absolutely. Those are solid words, Sergeant Major. I appreciate it. And I know you've been here for a little over a year now, and you have some time still left with us at FORSCOM. So I'm excited to see how much more we transform in the rest of your time here as Sergeant Major. So I appreciate all the words about warfighting and lethality. And now I'm going to ask you a super easy question because this year is the Army's 250th birthday. So we're excited. We're celebrating our birthday all year long with all kinds of events. There'll be tons of stuff that we'll do up on the Capitol. I got some stuff planned for General Pappas and things here at FORSCOM. So since we're celebrating, and you've been in the Army for a very long time.
Oh boy.
Yes. What does Army 250 mean to you?
I was thinking about, as we kind of go into this transitional year of celebrating, being the oldest service, and I'm the oldest sibling, is like, wow, that's, not exactly as old as the Army is. Collectively, with the wisdom behind the camera, we probably could stack up a few decades, not a century of service, but the Army's been around for a while, and I think about 250 years. What's something about the Army that's probably important to me and important to soldiers out there in FORSCOM? And I always kind of come back to Valley Forge. I think about Valley Forge because this leader developed this thing called the Blue Book. His name was von Steuben. And what was most important about von Steuben and Valley Forge is the transformation that happened in the Army. And the transformation was empowering a non-commissioned officer. The NCO Corps received some authorities and responsibilities to train and to maintain discipline at Valley Forge. When I think about that, the story of the non-commissioned officer in the Army, it started 250 years ago, and what happened at Valley Forge. Well, over the decades and centuries of service, the past, the present, and the future non-commissioned officers that are yet to come, I think about the dedication, the courage, the selfless service, the commitment, the things those non-commissioned officers did back in our Continental Army that paved the way to who we are as a non-commissioned officer corps now. We earned the title, the backbone of the Army. I mean, there's no better title that you could search for when you think about the non-commissioned officer corps. So when I think about the Army of 250, I think about the backbone. I think about that Continental Army that was transforming at Valley Forge, much like the U.S. Army that is transforming right now, continuous transformation. I think about the NCO's inherent role in transformation, not just how we fight, not just communicating with scientists with new technology, how we fight and redoing our doctrine on the edge. I would say I'm most proud about the Army and our non-commissioned officer corps. And to all the non-commissioned officers that are out there, past, present, and those yet to come in the future, thank you for what you do every day.
Wow, Sergeant Major, I really got chills during all of that. That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. And I appreciate you coming on and talking to us about warfighting and lethality and all the great things that FORSCOM is doing. And so thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem. And we'll see you next time on the front line.
Absolutely.